Hold the line by the grace of God!
This is one of the most shocking battles in human history. In the summer of 1097, the exhausted army of Crusaders was marching across the sun-scorched plains of Anatolia. They had been walking for several days without water under the scorching sun, when suddenly the horizon was filled with thousands of horsemen. It was an ambush that Sultan Kilij Arslan had been preparing for weeks, and it was supposed to be the end of the First Crusade. But instead of the panic and chaos the Sultan had expected, something incredible happened. The knights, who seemed half dead from thirst and exhaustion, lined up in battle formation with iron discipline. What should have been an easy victory for the Seljuks turned into one of the most dramatic battles of the Middle Ages. Watch the video to the end to find out how a handful of knights managed to withstand an 8-hour attack by tens of thousands of mounted archers, and why the Sultan called the Crusaders Iron Demons. Want to know why this battle changed the course of world history? After the capture of Nicaea, the Crusaders faced a harsh reality. Hundreds of kilometers of hostile territory lay ahead of them. In summer, the Anatolian plateau turned into a veritable oven, with temperatures reaching 40 degrees in the shade, which was simply non-existent. The army of nearly 100,000 people, including pilgrims and supply trains, stretched for many kilometers. The supply problem became critical on the third day of the march. The Byzantines, who had promised support, disappeared immediately after Nicaea, leaving the Crusaders alone with the merciless nature. The wells along the way were poisoned or filled in on the orders of the Sultan. The fields were burned, and the villages were abandoned by their inhabitants. Bohemond of Taranto, one of the leaders of the campaign, made the fateful decision to divide the army. He believed that 2 columns would be able to find water and provisions more easily than one huge mass. He and Robert of Normandy led the first column, while Godfrey of Bouillon and Raymond of Toulouse led the second. The army marched along an ancient Roman road that had fallen into disrepair over the centuries. The stones of the pavement had shifted, forming dangerous potholes that broke the horses' legs. The heavy knight's armor turned into red-hot ovens, inside which people literally boiled in their own sweat. Local Christian Armenians encountered along the way warned of large Turkish forces ahead, but the Crusaders, intoxicated by their victory at Nicaea, did not take the warning seriously. They believed that after fleeing from the city walls, the Sultan would not dare to engage in open battle. There was virtually no reconnaissance. The light cavalry of the Crusaders could not compete with the Turkish horsemen in their native element. Detachments sent to search for water often did not return, falling victim to Turkish patrols. The army was moving almost blindly. By the end of June, the situation had become desperate. People were dying of heat stroke right on the march, and horses were dying by the dozens. Some knights were forced to walk, carrying heavy armor, which was considered the greatest shame for a noble warrior. It was at this moment of utmost exhaustion that Sultan Kilij Arslan decided to strike. He assembled a huge army of Anatolian Turks, called on the Danakil, and even hired mercenaries from distant Persia. The plan was simple: destroy the first column before the second could come to its aid. On June 29th, Bohemond's scouts spotted clouds of dust in the distance. It was not a storm, as some had hoped, but the approaching Turkish army. The Crusaders had only a few minutes to prepare for the battle that would decide the fate of the entire campaign. Write in the comments what you think. Could this trap have been avoided if the army had not split up? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories about the great battles of the past. Now you will learn how one of the most brutal and intense battles of the Middle Ages began. At dawn on July 1st, 1097, the first pale light was just appearing over the Crusaders' camp. The humid air trembled with the breath of hundreds of fires burning out after the night. Tired warriors stretched, cleaned their weapons, repaired their harnesses, fed their horses. Everything went on as usual. No one suspected that, in a few minutes, this familiar morning routine would turn into chaos. The sentries standing on the eastern hills were the first to notice the movement. Silhouettes of horsemen flashed through the thick fog. At first, they were mistaken for allies, perhaps the vanguard of Godfrey of Bouillon, but it soon became clear that they were enemies. Countless troops of light cavalry were approaching from the east, and their numbers were growing by the minute. The roar of trumpets, the cries of muezzins, and the clang of iron rolled across the plain. Sultan Kilij Arslan chose the moment to attack with almost surgical precision. The Crusaders had not yet had time to put on their armor. Many horses were unsaddled, and weapons lay in tents. At this vulnerable moment, the first blow fell on the camp of pilgrims. Women, children, priests, and old people accompanying the army. Arrows rained down, and within minutes, panic broke out. The Turkish army acted as it knew how, quickly, accurately, and ruthlessly. It was not a battle, but a hunt. Light cavalry armed with short composite bows approached within shooting range, fired a volley of arrows, and immediately rode away before the heavy cavalry could respond. Their horses were fast and enduring, and their arrows were deadly. Even chainmail did not always save at such a distance. Bohemond of Taranto, one of the most experienced commanders of the Crusaders, instantly assessed the danger. He gave orders with cold determination. The infantry were to form a defensive ring around the camp, using carts and barrels as barricades. Each section of the front had to hold out to the last. While the soldiers were building their defenses, arrows whistled overhead, the air trembling with their rustling. Knights who had not yet had time to get dressed hurriedly put on their chainmail, fastened their belts, and helped each other pull on their gloves. Many fell, struck by arrows before they could even raise their swords. The bodies of those who had not even had time to wake up lay by the fires. The pilgrims' camp turned into a nightmare. Women screamed, clutching their children, while priests with crosses in their hands tried to calm the crowd. But arrows flew overhead, and everything descended into chaos. Some rushed to the forest, hoping to find shelter, but there they were overtaken by Turkish horsemen, as merciless as death itself. At that moment, Robert of Normandy appeared on the other flank. His men had managed to saddle their horses and form a battle wedge. To the sound of horns and the clatter of hooves, the heavy cavalry moved forward. Several dozen knights crashed into the enemy ranks, hoping to overwhelm them with their powerful charge. The earth shook, but at that moment, the Turks parted as if they had dissolved and unleashed a barrage of arrows from the flanks on the attackers. The knights, accustomed to direct combat, did not understand who they were fighting. The enemy did not engage in combat, did not take the blow, did not give them the opportunity to show their valor. The Turkish cavalry circled around, attacking from a distance, exhausting, irritating, and breaking morale. It was a war of patience, and the Crusaders were not ready for it. Fulcher of Chartres, a priest and eyewitness to the events, later wrote that the arrows fell so thickly that the sky seemed to darken. Shields turned into hedgehogs, with dozens of shafts sticking out of each one. People could barely raise their arms to shield themselves, and the sound of taut bowstrings hung over the plain with a continuous buzz. By noon, the battle had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. Bohemond rushed between the defensive positions, encouraging his soldiers. His armor was riddled with arrows, but he continued to command. The Turks were firing on the camp from three sides, and it seemed that all was lost. The crossbowmen were running out of bolts. The spearmen were running out of strength, and the heat was intensifying the suffering of the wounded. Meanwhile, clouds of dust could be seen in the distance, a sign of new Turkish reinforcements. Kilij Arslan was confident that victory was near. The Crusaders seemed broken, hunted down, ready to flee. But Bohemond did not give up. He sent messengers to Godfrey of Bouillon, the second column that was following behind. The messengers broke out of the encirclement, risking their lives, and rushed across the hills to reach their destination before sunset. If help did not arrive, the camp would fall by evening. It was at this moment, when everything seemed to be over, that the tide turned. The sound of horns could be heard on the horizon, a response from the west. Dust rose above the plain. It was Gottfried's forces approaching. The Turks, confident of victory, did not have time to regroup. A new phase of the battle was beginning, one that would turn a desperate defense into a legendary victory that would be talked about for centuries. Want to know how a few hundred knights managed to put an army of steppe horsemen to flight? How did Bohemond's tactics change the course of the entire campaign? All this in the next chapter. Now I will tell you about a military trick that is not written about in textbooks. Bohemond of Taranto used a tactic he had learned in the wars against the Byzantines in southern Italy. He ordered all the knights to saddle up and form a tight phalanx together with the infantry. This was unheard of. Noble knights fighting on foot like ordinary soldiers. The Crusaders formed what Arab chroniclers called an iron wall. Heavy infantry with large shields stood in the front row, creating an impenetrable barrier. Behind them stood spearmen with a forest of spears, and in the third row were dismounted knights with two-handed swords, ready to repel any breakthrough. This formation slowly retreated to a small hill, where Bohemond set up an improvised command post. Priests and wounded soldiers took shelter in the center of the formation, praying incessantly and encouraging the warriors. Women carried water to the fighters, risking their lives under a hail of arrows. The Turks were baffled by this tactic. Their traditional methods, false retreats, flanking maneuvers, wearing down the enemy, did not work against the immovable wall of shields. The Sultan ordered his mounted archers to approach to a dangerous distance so that their arrows could pierce the shields. Casualties on both sides mounted, but the Crusaders held their ground. An anonymous chronicler who participated in the battle wrote that the ground around their formation was so thickly strewn with arrows that it was impossible to walk. Many warriors resembled porcupines with arrows sticking out of their armor, but they continued to fight. At the most critical moment, when it seemed that the defense was about to collapse, a miracle happened. One of the priests claimed to have seen St. George on a white horse in the sky, leading a heavenly army to the aid of the Christians. Whether this was true or a hallucination of exhausted people is unknown, but the effect was striking. Inspired by the vision, the Crusaders repelled another attack with renewed strength. Their battle cry, Deus vult, God wills it, rang out across the battlefield. Even mortally wounded soldiers refused to leave the ranks, knowing that every man counted. Sultan Kilij Arslan was amazed by the steadfastness of the Franks. He had expected an easy victory over an exhausted army, but instead his warriors crashed against the iron discipline of the Crusaders, like waves against a rock. The Turkish emirs began to grumble that the Franks were enchanted, or that their armor was impenetrable to arrows. By midday, both armies were exhausted. The July sun beat down mercilessly, turning the battlefield into a veritable hell. The Turkish horses, unaccustomed to such a long ride in the heat, began to fall from exhaustion. But the Crusaders were also at their limit. Many had run out of water, and the number of wounded was growing. And then the first units of the second column of Crusaders appeared on the horizon. Godfrey of Bouillon and his knights rushed to the rescue, raising clouds of dust. The battle entered a new, decisive phase. Want to know how 50 knights changed the course of the battle? Godfrey of Bouillon, Duke of Lower Lorraine, did not wait for his entire army to arrive. He assembled a vanguard of 50 of his best knights and attacked the Turks from the rear, while they were completely focused on storming Bohemond's positions. The heavy cavalry's strike against the unprepared enemy was devastating. The knights on fresh horses crashed into the Turkish ranks like lightning. Spears pierced the light armor of the steppe warriors, and heavy swords destroyed everything in their path. Panic began to spread among the Turks. Seeing help approaching, Bohemond gave the order to counterattack. Exhausted but inspired, the Crusaders went on the offensive. The dismounted knights remounted their horses and struck the Turks from the front, while Godfrey crushed them from the rear. Sultan Kilij Arslan found himself trapped in his own trap. His army, stretched out in a crescent around the Crusader camp, could not quickly regroup. Attempts to turn part of his forces against Godfrey led to chaos. The troops got in each other's way, and commands were lost in the noise of battle. Raymond of Toulouse led the main forces of the second column and struck the left flank of the Turks. His Provençal knights, eager to distinguish themselves, attacked with such ferocity that the Turkish flank began to crumble. The battle turned into a chaotic melee where the numerical superiority of the Turks no longer played a decisive role. Adhemar de Montel, the papal legate, personally led the attack of a detachment of priests and squires. Even the clergy took up arms at this critical moment. The sight of the bishop in shining armor, wielding a warhammer, inspired the ordinary soldiers to feats of valor. The turning point came when one of the main Turkish emirs fell. His detachment, having lost its leader, began to retreat, dragging neighboring units with it. The Sultan desperately tried to restore order, but it was too late. Panic had gripped the entire Turkish army. The Crusaders pursued the fleeing Turks for several kilometers. The battlefield was littered with abandoned weapons, bows, and quivers of arrows. Many Turks, in order to save their lives, even threw away their saddles to lighten their horses. The victory was complete and crushing. But the most surprising thing was what happened after the battle. The Crusaders captured the Sultan's camp with huge supplies of food, and more importantly, water. The thirsty warriors were finally able to drink their fill, and many wept with relief, thanking God for their miraculous salvation. Do you think the Crusaders could have won without the arrival of the second column? Write your opinion in the comments. After 8 hours of continuous battle, the field at Dorylaeum was a gruesome sight. Thousands of bodies littered the scorched plain, the moans of the wounded mingling with the neighing of dying horses. The Crusaders lost about 4,000 men, including many noble knights and ordinary pilgrims. Turkish losses were significantly higher. Contemporaries speak of 8,000 dead. But for Sultan Kilij Arslan, the hardest blow was the loss of his personal treasury and harem, which had been captured in the camp. The gold accumulated over many years now belonged to the Franks, which undermined his authority among the emirs. The trophies were truly royal. The Crusaders captured tents made of precious fabrics, carpets, and weapons decorated with gold and silver. But the most valuable were the food supplies: grain, dried meat, dates, and most importantly, thousands of water skins that saved the army from death in the desert. Hundreds of beautiful Turkish horses were captured, light and hardy, perfectly adapted to local conditions. These horses became a real salvation for the knights who had lost their heavy European steeds. Many Franks adopted the Turkish style of riding and lightweight saddles. There were so many wounded that the army was forced to stop for 3 days. Doctors and hospitaller monks worked day and night, removing arrows and stitching wounds. Many soldiers were left crippled. Turkish arrows that hit the joints often led to the loss of limb mobility. Among the fallen were the heroes of the day. Robert of Paris, a young knight, died covering the retreat of his wounded comrades. His body was found surrounded by the bodies of 7 Turks. Tancred, Bohemon's nephew, was wounded 5 times, but survived and became a legend of the Crusades. There were few Turkish prisoners. In the heat of battle, the Crusaders rarely took prisoners. The few who were captured were interrogated and provided valuable information about the further route through Anatolia. Some of them, who converted to Christianity, became guides for the army. The psychological effect of the victory was enormous. The Crusaders believed that God was truly on their side, that their mission was sacred. This belief helped them overcome all subsequent trials on their way to the Holy Land. Dorylaeum became a symbol of divine protection. But the most important result was that the route through Asia Minor was now open. Sultan Kilij Arslan, shaken by the defeat, did not dare to attack the Crusaders openly again. Local emirs preferred to pay tribute or let the Franks pass through their lands rather than risk battle. Did you know that this battle forever changed the military art of the Crusaders? Dorylaeum became a cruel school where European knights first encountered the Eastern way of warfare. The lessons learned from this battle determined the tactics of the Crusaders for the next 2 centuries of their presence in the East. The main discovery was the need for cooperation between heavy cavalry and infantry. In Europe, infantry was considered a secondary force, but against Turkish archers, it was disciplined infantry with shields that became the key to victory. Knights learned to value ordinary soldiers and coordinate their actions with them. The Crusaders understood the importance of reconnaissance and security. After Dorylaeum, no column moved without reinforced guards and scouts. Special detachments of Turco Poles were created, light cavalry from local Christians, capable of resisting Turkish horsemen on their territory. The marching formation also changed. The army now moved in compact groups capable of quickly forming a defensive square. The baggage train and pilgrims were placed in the center of the column, protected on all sides by combat units. This formation made a surprise attack less effective. The battle demonstrated the importance of water supply in the east. After Dorylaeum, the Crusaders began to carefully plan their routes from one water source to another. Special units were organized to guard wells and carry water supplies in wineskins. The Crusaders began to adopt elements of Eastern weaponry. Many knights began to wear light Eastern chainmail under their armor, which provided better protection against arrows. Interest in composite bows arose, although it was extremely difficult for Europeans to master this weapon. Psychologically, the battle hardened the Crusaders. They no longer panicked at the sight of a cloud of arrows or the horsemen surrounding them. Dorylaeum taught them to stand to the death, trust their comrades, and believe in ultimate victory. This steadfastness became their main weapon. Dorylaeum was also a lesson for the Turks. They realized that the Franks were not ordinary enemies who could be defeated by traditional methods. They began to develop new tactics for fighting the Crusaders, based on avoiding decisive battles and wearing down the enemy. Military historians consider Dorylaeum a turning point in the development of medieval tactics. A new type of army was born here, capable of fighting in both European and Eastern styles. This flexibility allowed the Crusaders to establish their own states in the East. The impact of the battle was felt for decades. The veterans of Dorylaeum became mentors to new generations of Crusaders, passing on their experience of fighting Eastern armies. Their stories shaped the military doctrine of the Crusader states in the Holy Land. In the next chapter, we will learn about the legends and myths that this great battle gave rise to. After Dorylaeum, incredible stories about miracles that occurred during the battle spread throughout Europe. Chroniclers, many of whom were not eyewitnesses, embellished the stories with amazing details. These legends became an important part of the propaganda of the Crusades, inspiring new warriors to go to the east. The most famous legend was that of the appearance of holy warriors. Many participants in the battle swore that they had seen Saint George, Saint Demetrius, and Saint Mercury fighting in the ranks of the Crusaders. They were described as warriors in shining armor on white horses, striking the infidels with heavenly swords. There were stories about a miraculous spring that gushed from the ground after Bishop Adamar's prayer in the heat of battle. Supposedly, this spring quenched the thirst of the entire army and disappeared immediately after the victory. Pilgrims then searched for this place for years, considering the water to be holy. Anna Komnene, a Byzantine princess and historian, recorded a story about how the arrows of the Turks miraculously did not harm some of the Crusaders. She was skeptical of such stories, but acknowledged that many Byzantines who served as guides confirmed the unusual events. A legend spread about Bohemon's sword, which allegedly glowed white from the number of enemies it had slain, but did not burn the hero's hands. This sword was then kept for a long time as a relic in Antioch, and pilgrims paid large sums of money to touch it. Turkish sources are also full of mystical explanations for the defeat. They wrote about iron demons who felt no pain and continued to fight even with mortal wounds. Some emirs claim that the Franks used witchcraft to make themselves invulnerable. One of the most touching legends tells of a young squire who sang a psalm in the heat of battle. His clear voice was allegedly heard across the battlefield, and even the Turks paused their attack for a moment, enchanted by the singing. Whether this is true or fiction is unknown, but the story became popular in medieval Europe. Relics from the battlefield at Dorylaeum were highly prized in the Christian world. Broken spears, chainmail rings, even simple stones from the battlefield became sacred objects. Churches throughout Europe boasted of possessing authentic relics from Dorylaeum. These legends served an important function. They transformed a brutal military campaign into a sacred mission. Every new crusader dreamed of seeing the same miracles, of witnessing divine intervention. The mythology of Dorylaeum fueled the crusading movement for decades. After the defeat at Dorylaeum, Sultan Kilij Arslan found himself in a catastrophic situation. He lost not only his army and treasury, but also his reputation as the invincible ruler of Anatolia. Many emirs who had previously obeyed him unquestioningly now openly doubted his ability to resist the Franks. The Sultan fled to his capital, Konya, haunted by nightmares of iron warriors who did not fall under a hail of arrows. His court chroniclers would later write that he was unable to speak for 3 days, so shaken was he by what he had seen. The strength and discipline of the Crusaders completely destroyed his ideas about the Western barbarians. The scorched earth strategy, which was supposed to destroy the Crusaders, backfired on the Sultan himself. The ravaged regions could not feed his own troops, and attempts to raise a new army were thwarted by the emir's unwillingness to risk their forces. Many preferred to conclude separate agreements with the approaching Franks. Danishmend, a longtime rival of Kilij Arslan, took advantage of his weakness and captured several important fortresses in eastern Anatolia. The Sultan found himself between the hammer of the Crusaders and the anvil of internal enemies. His empire, which had seemed so powerful, began to crumble before his eyes. Meanwhile, the Crusaders advanced unhindered through Anatolia. Cities and fortresses surrendered without a fight, their rulers preferring to buy their freedom with gold and provisions rather than repeat the fate of the Sultan's army. The road to Antioch was open, and no one dared to stand in the way of the Iron Demons. Kilij Arslan tried to form an alliance with the Fatimids of Egypt against their common enemy, but they refused, seeing in the Crusaders an opportunity to weaken their Seljuk rivals. The Sultan was left alone, watching his empire melt away like snow under the spring sun. The psychological blow was so severe that the Sultan never again dared to engage in open battle with the Crusaders. For the rest of his life, he fought only defensive wars, trying to preserve at least part of his possessions. Dorylaeum broke not only his army, but also his spirit. The irony of fate was that the defeat at Dorylaeum paradoxically saved the Sultan from complete destruction. The Crusaders, focused on reaching Jerusalem, did not pursue their defeated enemy, allowing him to retain power in central Anatolia. Years later, on his deathbed, Kilij Arslan advised his sons never to underestimate the Franks and to learn the art of war from them. He recognized that at Dorylaeum he had faced not just an army, but a new military force that would change the entire Middle East. The victory at Dorylaeum opened the way for the Crusaders, not only geographically, but also psychologically. The army that had left Constantinople uncertain and divided became, after the battle, a single organism, tempered in the fire of battle. Every warrior now knew that they were capable of defeating any enemy. The march through Anatolia after Dorylaeum became a triumphal procession. The local Christian population, Armenians, Greeks, Syrians, welcomed the Crusaders as liberators. They supplied the army with provisions, served as guides, and warned of ambushes. Without this support, further advancement would have been impossible. The Crusaders learned an important lesson from the battle: the need for unified command. A council of leaders was created, where decisions were made jointly. This helped to avoid many conflicts and ensured coordination of actions. Dorylaeum taught them that only unity leads to victory. The captured trophies solved many logistical problems. The Sultan's gold made it possible to buy provisions from the local population at good prices, rather than plundering villages. This ensured the loyalty of the population and uninterrupted supplies for the army all the way to Antioch. The military reputation of the Crusaders after Dorylaeum reached almost mythical proportions. Rumors of invincible iron warriors spread throughout the east. Many Muslim rulers preferred to negotiate with the Franks rather than tempt fate on the battlefield. The battle also attracted the attention of the Byzantine Empire. Emperor Alexius III Comnenus, who was initially skeptical of the Crusaders, now saw them as a real force. He began to support the campaign more actively, hoping to regain lost territories in Asia Minor. For ordinary soldiers and pilgrims, Dorylaeum became confirmation of their divine mission. They saw the victory as a sign from above that their campaign was blessed by heaven. This belief helped them survive all subsequent trials: the siege of Antioch, the arduous march through the desert, and the storming of Jerusalem. The medical experience gained in treating the wounded after the battle proved invaluable. Doctors learned how to remove Turkish arrows and treat specific wounds from curved sabers. New methods of field surgery were developed, which later saved thousands of lives. Dorylaeum changed the demographics of the campaign. Many pilgrims who were unfit for battle, frightened by the cruelty of the battle, turned back or remained in the captured cities. The army became more professional and mobile, which facilitated further advancement. The Battle of Dorylaeum was one of the defining moments not only of the First Crusade, but of the entire Crusader era. It proved that Western European military art was capable of adapting and winning in completely unfamiliar conditions. This experience formed the basis for the Crusaders' two-century presence in the Middle East. Military historians consider Dorylaeum to be the birthplace of combined tactics, which united European and Eastern elements of warfare. The interaction of heavy cavalry, disciplined infantry, and light auxiliary troops became a model for subsequent Crusader armies. These principles were applied until the Battle of Hattin in 1187. For the Muslim world, Dorylaeum was a wake-up call. The defeat of the Turkish cavalry, which had been considered invincible, demonstrated the need for new approaches to warfare against the Franks. A military evolution began, which after several generations led to the emergence of commanders such as Nur ad-Din and Saladin. The battle had a huge impact on European military art. Knights returning from the East brought back new knowledge about fortification, siege techniques, and supply organization. Many elements of Eastern military science were adapted and applied in European wars. The cultural influence of Dorylaeum is difficult to overestimate. The battle entered epic poems and chivalric novels, becoming a symbol of Christian valor. The images of the heroes of Dorylaeum, Bohemond, Godfrey, Tancred, inspired generations of European aristocrats to military exploits. Dorylaeum changed the geopolitical map of the Middle East. The weakening of the Seljuks after their defeat allowed the Crusaders to establish their own states in Edessa, Antioch, and Jerusalem. These Latin kingdoms lasted for almost 2 centuries, becoming a bridge between East and West. The economic consequences were no less significant. The Crusaders' establishment of control over the trade routes through Anatolia revived trade between Europe and Asia. The Italian maritime republics, Venice, Genoa, Pisa, reaped huge profits from this trade. The battle contributed to technological exchange between civilizations. The Crusaders became acquainted with Greek fire, improved siege engines, and new methods of steel processing. This knowledge later revolutionized European military affairs. Dorylaeum remains in historical memory as an example of how willpower, discipline, and mutual assistance can overcome the numerical superiority of the enemy. This battle proved that in war, it is not the one with more soldiers who wins, but the one who makes better use of their forces and knows how to learn from the enemy. The story of the Battle of Dorylaeum is not just a tale of a military clash between 2 armies on a hot July day in 1097. It is a story of a clash of civilizations, the birth of a new type of warfare, and human resilience in the face of seemingly inevitable doom. 8 hours of battle at Dorylaeum changed the course of history. If the Crusaders had been defeated, the First Crusade would have ended before it began. There would have been no Latin states in the East, and the cultural exchange that enriched European civilization with the knowledge of antiquity in the East would not have taken place. Do you think the course of world history would have changed if Sultan Kilij Arslan had won at Dorylaeum? Write your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories about the great battles that determined the fate of humanity.